So in our next panel, the focus of the discussion will be on video telematics and the Indian CV ecosystem. This session is supported by Lightmetrics. And just to give you a quick introduction, Lightmetrics was founded in 2015 and is the most popular video telematics platform among large telematics service providers in North America. It is currently being used by customers across North America, LATAM, Africa, and Australia. With the industry's most efficient AI on the edge, Lightmetrics is able to bring the benefits of edge AI to make driving safer and understand driver behavior better, helping therefore fleets become safer and more efficient. In fact, fleets are able to see how their trucks are being driven, reduce risk from bad driving practices like distraction, drowsiness, cell phone use, etc. Fleet owners and operators can stream video live from their trucks on demand, retrieve video evidence in case of accidents, and know who the driver is using face recognition. Further, as the only modular and hardware agnostic video telematics platform, enterprises have enormous flexibility in designing their own video telematics solution and unlocking the recurring revenue opportunities for TSPs, tier ones, and OEMs. And now, to shed more light on this interesting technology and to talk more about video telematics and the Indian CV ecosystem, please join me in welcoming Mr. Devraj Chaki, Deputy Senior Vice President, SBI General, Mr. Arajay Sharma, Chief Platform Head, HCV, Mahindra & Mahindra Truck and Bus Division, Mr. Krishna Govindrao, Co-founder and Head of Product, Lightmetrics, Mr. Santosh Datta, Lead Engineering, Product Area Connectivity, Robert Bosch Engineering and Business Solutions, Mr. Lakshmi Narasimhan Jagannathan, Head Connected Technologies at Ashok Leland, Mr. Rahul Jain, Director Software Engineering, BU Connectivity at Harman. And finally, our moderator for the session is Mr. Ashim Sharma, who is Partner and Group Head, Business Performance Improvement Consulting at Nomura Research Institute Consulting and Solutions India. Over to you, Ashim, to take it forward.
Thank you, Rohit, and very good afternoon, everyone. I think we have a really august panel today, which touches upon all the aspects of telematics. So really looking forward to the discussion that will emanate from here onwards in this panel today. I think it's quite clear to many of us that telematics, including video, is giving immense abilities, whether it's in terms of tracking fleets, doing the analytics, doing driver risk management, and it unlocks kind of significant opportunities, whether it's for managing incidents that happen, for training of drivers, in terms of insurance premiums, even vehicle customizations. And we also see that this is a fast emerging market, and at the same time, because India is a cost-conscious market, it's also important to look at how to make this more cost-efficient as a solution, and secondly, also cater to the peculiarities that the Indian operating landscape presents. So we will be touching about some of those aspects and also looking at what could be the ways in which we could catalyze the rollout of telematics in the Indian commercial vehicle industry. So with that, let me begin the panel discussion. Now, to begin with, my question would be to you, Mr. Chaki from SBI, to kickstart the proceedings for today. So we know that telematics, and when we talk of telematics, and one clear thing that's been seen over the years is how it can be used in providing usage-based insurance. And we know that that telematics provides a key role in collecting data on the vehicle, the vehicle driver, the driving habits, and analyze the risk profile to understand whether it's braking habits, whether it's about the rapid acceleration, the duration the driver drives for, the kind of routes taken, etc. And that helps in settling of the insurance claims, etc. So what are some of the key trends and business drivers, do you think, for telematics insurance in the CV industry? And how in particular can video telematics be leveraged in the insurance industry in terms of accidental insurance settlements or deciding usage-based insurance, the UBI? So over to you, Mr. Shaki.
Yeah, thank you. Good afternoon to my co-panelists and also to the participants. Just to take you to the insurance perspective, particularly in the commercial vehicle segment, it's in a very, very nascent stage in India in the CV portion, but it is picking up very fast because of the rapid industrialization as well as the economy owing up, and plus the OEMs looking into this segment as a greenfield kind of a project and trying to do something into this. In telematics, it's not only about video telematics. Video telematics is only one part of it. It has been used now not only for claim settlement but also for the drivers and other usage-based insurance products. Unfortunately, the regulator has not been prescribing any such formal kind of a product or thoughts or ideas as of now. A few sandbox ideas have been already placed with some of the insurance companies that have tried in the private car segment, but that has not received, I would say, much of impetus as well as offtake from the consumers in this current under the current situation. But the future seems to be quite bright for three segments of vehicle. One is, of course, the private vehicles. The second is the two-wheel industry. That's is also coming under this scope. And the third is the CV segment, particularly the three-wheeler segment. That is also coming up using this technology. And of course, from there, what we can see is that how it's going to be used rapidly for building up the platform of interconnected vehicles. That's the first thing that they are trying to do. And in EVs, telematics would play a larger role. The challenges that we face, of course, are multiple. One is, of course, the combined intelligence, how to utilize that. And then as of now, the discounts or the other kind of benefits are meant to be provided by for all consumers or customers. So there's no differential way of treating a person's driving habit or a fleet's I would say the maintenance wise or the otherwise how a fleet being operated. The discount in the market currently is basically based on the earlier tariff, and that is still continuing. So usage-based insurance would pick up the way it is picked up in the other countries across the world, but it will take time in India until and unless there's a change from the regulation. So that's what we look into it in this point of time.
Understood, Mr. Shaki. So I think, yeah, very clear out there that some things have to be done on the regulatory side to be able to get some of these benefits across to the consumer, and that will probably kickstart larger application of UI. Maybe before I move to the other panelists, Mr. Govindrao, a quick perspective for you also on this, because have you seen some of this happen in other places, and where you've seen the insurance premiums for, say, factory-fitted telematic systems lower than usual CVs, especially fitted with your system and things like that?
Sure. Thanks, Mr. Sharma, and hello to everyone, to all the panelists and all the attendees. So from our perspective, we have seen, so our presence has primarily been in North America till now, though we have recently expanded to other geographies, and we are trying to make a push into India now. And what we have seen is, I completely agree with Mr. Chaki that there is a lot of regulatory oversight when you want to use certain factors for how you underwrite, right? That is not allowed. Even in the US, it's not allowed as such to use these factors how you want. The way in the other markets this is being used is that video is seen as a sort of incontrovertible evidence of what exactly happened. Otherwise, you would have to use professional accident reconstruction experts, and it would take time and money to settle what exactly happened. And insurance companies typically want to settle things as soon as possible, right? This whole thing about first notification of loss, and the sooner you settle, lesser the amount involved. So video so far has been primarily used to, figure out who was responsible or what exactly happened and what's the extent of damage, right? For example, even in the case of, like a driver getting hurt, where there is workman compensation insurance, sometimes injuries are exaggerated. If you have video, it's clear as to what exactly happened. So this is where it really sort of comes in. And from a regulatory approval point of view, even in the US, what is happening now is insurance carriers are giving discounts just to be able to collect data at scale, so that they can see, because from an insurance point of view, right, for them, anecdotal evidence is not going to cut it at all. They need everything at a very large scale, at a statistically significant scale. So they have started collecting data for some time now, and they're continuing to collect. I think the hope I have for India is, I keep telling folks we work with in the US about how we skipped the 3G revolution and went to 4G straight away. And they're amazed when they hear about how widely available 4G is. And the clincher is when they hear how much we pay for data, they're just blown away. So I'm kind of hoping that when it comes to telematics, because I'm not very clear about whether telematics is a state subject or union subject. Maybe the other panelists can shed some light. In the US, insurance is a state subject, which just complicates everything so much. You need 50 states to approve something before you can do something. I'm hoping that we can take learnings from there and kind of leapfrog the world like we did with 4G becoming more widespread.
Understood. Yeah. Thanks. Yeah. Not only 4G, I think since we are with the CV industry, also BS4 to BS6 been a big leapfrog in the country. And yeah, certainly, I think some of those lessons could go in for India as well. And hopefully then we see wider application of telematics in the country as well. Moving on from insurance to another area, and the question there is for you, Mr. Datta. So we know that RBI offers iTrans, the Intelligent Transportation Management System, which is the end-to-end vehicle-to-infrastructure ecosystem. Can you elaborate on some of the major solution application areas and use cases of iTrans in the CV industry, with regard to India, so that we can sort of then kickstart some of the discussion around how it's being applied in India?
Thanks a lot. Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks, Ashim. Thanks, other panelists. You really touched upon commercial vehicles and telematics. In fact, we, as a very important topic, which is also close to our internal studies and evaluations as well. But what is interesting is when we look at telematics and India as a market, or for that matter, most of the other markets, there are various drivers, which we really need to address. Right from, say, legislation. In India case, of course, it's AS 140. Part A, Part B, and this legislation which eventually evolve. And subsequently, the variants, especially with commercial vehicles, we really speak of the variants. It could be the tippers, or it could be the buses, high commercial vehicles, or MCVs, and including LCVs, and so on. And besides the fleet management, because every fleet owner has sometimes his own flavor with which he wants to really address the total cost of ownership and increasing the productivity and so on. And subsequently, you touched upon one specific topic, BS4 to BS6, and the real drive emissions, RDE meanwhile becoming the topic which we need to be prepared for as CV in next 1.5 years. And how do we enable telematics? How do we use telematics as a lever to address all these problems? So this being the typical problem space, the solution which we have typically at Bosch, and then also what we see as what we need as a market is how could we address these various stakeholders in the value chain and across different variants for a CV world is a challenge which we are which we are working on, and this is something which we really are working with the with a couple of OEMs in the market. So this is the broad outlook. And just to touch upon this video analytics as one topic, because that is something which we were really focusing on. Video analytics always makes sense, rather for me, I would look at video as an ADAS feature than more of a telematics feature. I mean, this is my current state of understanding, primarily because we look at videos to really give an intent to avoid the accident than, setting up an accident, and eventually look at how could we make use of the data, which is meanwhile being set up by the, a camera, or otherwise it could be a driver looking forward looking or whatever, and then trying to do an analysis, because that, as Mr. Chaki also has mentioned, is still some time before we see a market maturing towards this specific solution. So this being the space, the drivers, and this is a solution in which we're working on video, we still look at it as medium to long term as a solution when we speak of a video telematics at Bosch. And we are working both on onboard topics as well as offboard. Onboard talking of a hardware, where we speak of iTrams also having a hardwares in 4G, and also offboard where we speak of setting up a solution cloud, so that we could actually orchestrate these different solutions, not just focusing on the vehicle, but then also on the cloud, and provide an end-to-end solution to our customers.
Sure. Sure. Thank you, Mr. Datta, for elaborating on that. I think, yeah, as you very rightly said, variants are the fleet management, and I think also, another variant which is there, very varied fleet ownership sizes also. So very small fleet owners, medium,
right.
large, also
Yeah,
bringing
you're
sort
right.
of a flavor to the market. Yeah.
It's important that every fleet owner sometimes wants to bring in his own flavor to the to the overall optimization, and he has his own philosophy depending on the area in which you're operating and the application which is working on.
Right. So, and as you said, video is going to be the next one for the medium to the long term. Sure, thank you. Moving on, also, to Mr. Ajay Sharma, we know that, Mahindra also introduced a new telematics platform called the Mahindra iMax, I think somewhere in August 2020, if I'm not wrong. And, could you also share some of the key developments and how the company is leveraging use of intelligent telematics, and what is really the value prop that you're taking to the customer out there to get them to adopt the solution?
Yeah. Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Asim. I'm Ajay Sharma. Let me introduce for 2 minutes, 1 minute. So I'm working as a Chief Platform Head, Heavy Commercial Vehicles at Mahindra. So let us start with the future of mobility. I will come to your question. But when we talk about future of mobility, so 4 things comes to on our mind. One is connected, second is safe, third is the electrification, and fourth is autonomous. So we are first 2 points, which are very like a hot topic today's discussion, connected and safe. So these are the things. These depends upon few factors. One is the customer experience and expectations. Second is the technology. Third is the regulation. Fourth is the cost or the value addition. And fifth is the risks, like what are the different threats and risks. So if we see particularly commercial vehicles, they are early adopters in the sense some fleet operators, big fleet operators and logistic companies, to resolve their demand of enhancing their efficiencies, so their fleet efficiencies. They have early adopted. And seeing the benefits, the OEM also participated in this. And we have come to that point. Now it's a win-win situation for the fleet operator, because from the aftermarket solutions, so there were different platforms. So, and the vehicle level data was not integrated into it. So when it was a merger or the need was established, so then now all the commercial vehicles are OE fitted with the telematics. So and that has resolved so many other problems also. Now we have backward integrated, the team was explaining about the suppliers, even what the component is going in which vehicle, as well as how the vehicle is performing at different applications and different time, how the driver is operating it, and based upon that, a lot of other things, like one is what is the most important to the customer. One is the uptime. So the onboard diagnostic through the cloud or the internet. So the diagnostic is happening nowadays. Okay, so preventive maintenance we are now doing. So we are monitoring the vehicles. We can assess like what vehicle is going for the preventive thing. And upfront we are discussing with the driver or the service person. So apart from that, the fuel economy, that is the most important factor as on date, seeing the rates and this of diesel, So the fuel efficiency, average fuel efficiency per vehicle fleet, and then the theft, fuel thefts and this. So third is the geofencing and all those things. So these are already done and all the OEMs are on the same platform. What is next? So next requirement is coming, because I am saying it is based upon the value addition. So next requirement is coming is the safety, most prominent, because driver shortage is the main concern for the commercial vehicles as on date. And for the driver safety, because the time is changing so fast, like everybody is technologically upgrading and this, but the driver segment is there where more illiterate people are still there. But now the vehicle is becoming, earlier it was computer on wheels. then computers on wheels, then we have merged everything, and now it has become smartphone over the wheels. So to handle a smartphone over the wheels, so the literate drivers, like how we trained them based upon the use applications. So for that, a lot of data is required. And for the safety of that driver, that is the prime importance as on date, as well as some additional benefits like what we are discussing is the service or the AMC, annual maintenance contract. So how the driver is using, how well the operator has trained. So that also based upon this data can be done. Apart from that, the insurance, what we were discussing, like the different rates for the different fleet managers who are maintaining the vehicle properly, and the drivers are operating properly. So the till date, what is the telematics is the vehicle data combination with the application and the fleet management and all the features. And video will add and to will be add-on for the safety and the driver performance and all these things. So I think it will take a bit time, but we do not know because as on date, technology is changing so fast and the term or something. I see it's a very small term or to the mid-term.
Understood. Right. Right. Thank you, Mr. Sharma, for that.
Mr. Ashim, I think, yeah, you can move on to the next speaker. I'll connect with him.
Sure. Yeah, thank you, Mr. Sharma. I think you touched upon several important aspects. I think OBD, and my next question is around that, on how to use that data for artificial intelligence, AI, ML, etc. Fuel theft, and also very importantly, driver shortage, which is no longer just a phenomenon we used to talk about in India. I think we've all seen what happened in the UK also recently. So I think it's a global shortfall of drivers that's coming, and we are understanding that's one of the key things that's going to be thought about when we think about supply chain resilience going forward. So my next question is to you, Mr. Jagannathan. So, we understood about some of these aspects. So there is keeping track of the vehicle, optimizing fuel consumption, ensuring driver safety, which is leading to sort of mainstreaming of the telematics solutions. Yeah, how can these areas of usage be further combined with, say, artificial intelligence to, increase the robustness of the solution, and at the same time also, provide greater benefit to whether it's to the fleet operator or the driver, which I think in turn will catalyze a higher adoption of these technologies in the vehicles?
Thank you, Ashim, and good afternoon to everyone, to the panelists and also the viewers and the participants here. Myself, Lakshmi Narasimhan, I head Connected Technologies in Ashok Leyland. Telematics in the automotive industry, per se in a commercial vehicle industry, is not something new. And it all started maybe a couple of decades back. So where the only difference today we have to what it was started is, initially we started with something called Where is my vehicle, where we do only track, where it's only the visibility of the vehicle, from where we did a long journey today. And all the OEMs today are working on something called How is my vehicle. That's the second step we have gone into. That's called How is my vehicle. And in Ashok Leyland, we call a strategy. We call it as IABC strategy. I stands for IoT, A stands for artificial intelligence, B for big data, and C for the cloud. This is a technology, and we see the cocktail of technology makes the facet or this connected vehicle more efficient. And as also pointed out by the team here, we jovially say, data aata se sasta hai today. So that's a level of the data that is flourishing, and that is what makes this connected vehicle a bigger success. And AI, when you ask what is the AI, today AI is there in every facet of life. Today, what you want to browse, what you want to see is determined by the AI, and what you want to purchase is actually simulated by AI. They define or they push you to buy something. So AI is there in every facet, and we use data extensively in Ashok Leyland, and also all OEMs are using it to provide various support to the customer. Something like during the time of COVID, we did something called COVID analytics, where we took the data and find out on which route vehicle is running. So we have opened our dealership in those routes which are heavily trafficked. And also we see which where is the red zones and what is the support it needs to be provided. So we do a lot of analytics with the vehicle movement data, find out which state is opened up, which particular road is working on so well. That's one of the use case we did. Another is something like today there is a huge, humongous explosion of data that has happened. So it leads to something called, we call it as virtual sensors. So you need not have sensors for each and every aspect, something like a prediction of the load. So based on how the vehicle behaves, today we determine what is the load on the vehicle. So so not only that load, we have something called prognostics. So people went on to the next step called prognostics, when the battery will fail, or when there is a need for us to replace the alternator or the component. Today we do, previously when you want to do the service is based on predefined kilometers. Now today it's not about the predefined kilometers, it's do service when required. So there are a lot of prognostics going on that determines when you want to do the service. And another thing what we are talking about, where the efficiency or the driver safety, we do something called driver coaching. We call it as driver coaching app. So it takes the data, how the driver is driving, how he is applying his brake. We do a lot of analytics. And finally, we tell the driver what he has to do to improve upon. So in the lighter terms, we say today, vehicle talk and syncs data. From the point where we started, we always start today. So when a vehicle comes to our dealer point, so before a dealer executive comes near the vehicle, he will be knowing the complete history of the vehicle from the data how it is driven, and we give personalized solutions to a particular driver who is bringing the vehicle and tell him what he has to improve upon so that he gets a better mileage or will do it. So this AI, something like from the point today, what we talk in Ashok Leyland, we call it as AI-led Ashok Leyland. So we are talking about the strategies, we are talking about democratization, we are trying to bring the citizen scientists into the system. And today we are rightly poised in a position to something what we call as a digital twin, to formation of a digital twin, which is more towards today on the aircraft engines or a steam engine or a wind turbine, because they are too expensive. But today, even for commercial vehicles, the data, the source we have, internal and external data, we are so poised that we can have a digital twin, and every OEM today is working on to have a digital twin for every vehicle. So that could be a generative design, generative AI coming up. We have AI engineering coming up. There could be a lot of hyper automations, and there will be a huge decision intelligence that will be happening. And the same will be passed on to the customers in a specific personalized way. There is no more like there is a generic statement going on. So today, a lot of personalization is being done by using the AI in the vehicles.
Understood. Right. Thank you, Mr. Jagannathan, for sharing some of those very interesting aspects, whether it was during COVID, you're providing service on those routes, or prediction of road, prognosis-based services, and also driver coaching apps. And yeah, while it's well known that across the supply chain, people are leveraging this, whether it's for digital twins, whether it's for, routing your spares, etc. But I think you're really building it up for the drivers and the fleet operators there also, which would lead to higher adoption. And with that, it brings me finally and very importantly to another key aspect that we see. And for that, I would go across to you, Mr. Rahul Jain. It's about 5G. And we know that Harman has globally announced new solution, the form of 5G-ready telematics control unit. And in light of India's trials for 5G rollout, how do you see the uptake of 5G connected telematics solutions in the Indian CV industry? What could be some of, say, the potential use cases, benefits of 5G connectivity in the telematics control units? And with V2X and 5G, will it change the revenue landscape for OEMs? Some additional services, etc., becoming possible? Over to you.
Thank you, Ashim, and good afternoon to other panelists, and good afternoon to everybody. It's an interesting question, Ashim, because our belief is in connectivity and connected infrastructure, and we are heavily investing in these areas. We announced the first 5G TCUs, where we are working with the global OEMs, and we believe that 5G is the next hop for even India or globally, because the 5G technology enables the operators to basically leverage on reducing the overall cost of their infrastructure and providing much faster and improved services, low-cost services. And the operator revolution that has happened, mobile revolution that has happened in India, the cost of voice, data, everything has gone down drastically. And in order to keep up with that infrastructure, 5G is the next enabler. And we believe, mobile phones have a very short lifespan. They stay from, 6 months to 2 years is typical lifespan, while on the contrary, cars have a lifespan of 5 to 10 years or more, even in India, for example. So it has to be future ready. 5G is not yet ready in the Indian market or even across the globe. It's slowly picking up, but we are trying to be future ready, because while we have started the development of 5G, these cars roll out only in next 2 to 3 to 4 years time when they hit the road. Now, why 5G? The benefits that we get out of 5G is a straightforward high throughput. We are able to better leverage the spectrum from an operator perspective. Low latency is another big important aspect of it. And then coming to the newer technology trends towards V2X or CV2X, that basically enables a lot of new areas of autonomous driving or assisted ADAS features, where basically we can have much better control over the driving and improve the overall experience for the user and the drivers, as an example. We believe that with like, for example, we talked about video telematics, or we are talking about video telematics, and we are basically capturing huge amount of data here. Slowly, in our experience, operators want to basically take everything, OEMs want to take everything from the car and analyze that data for better predictive analytics and so many other areas, right? So the amount of need of data is increasing, and faster processing, more real-time scenarios that are coming up. And this is all something that is enabled through 5G, for example, right? Now, coming to V2X, for example, this is something which is slowly, China is a fast adapter for V2X, slowly getting adopted in Europe and US also. And one thing which is happening is that it enables communication with the car, between the cars. It enables us to figure out what's happening ahead, what is happening a kilometer ahead or 2 kilometers ahead, and this can help reduce the overall accidents and many other things. I mean, if you take Indian scenario, it's we have only 1% of population of vehicles as compared to rest of the world, but we have almost 11% of accidents that happen here. So in a way, it is beneficial, but we are also not very organized. I mean, it's easy to deploy a new technology like V2X in Western world, because they are a little bit more organized. But somehow we need to adapt these technologies for Indian ecosystem. Technologies are definitely going to be enabler, and we have to find use cases that can enable us to use it better. I strongly believe with the huge amount of vehicles coming on road in India, there is going to be a need for better mobile frequency band usage, and 5G is going to be enabler. So there you will see a very fast adaptation towards 5G from operators, and that will push a need for TCUs to also pick up 5G as an important enabler factor.
Understood. Right. So thanks for elaborating some of the new use cases you're coming in. I think you touched on a very important aspect also of, creating the enabling conditions so that the technology can actually be leveraged for the, in the most beneficial terms. Just deploying it will not solve the whole that will not solve all problems. We need to have that ecosystem in place as well. I think just to take another and some more perspective on that, I would go over to you, Mr. Satosh, that you are similarly on 5G. Do you think where is India placed in the backdrop of 5G on the forefront of development, telematics, platform connectivity? Any other perspective you have on that? And say advancements in V2I with a focus on the CV industry.
Hey, thanks, Hashim. 5G, I mean, everyone knows this is the next big leap in the technology space, and entire ecosystem needs to adapt yourself. And you also touched upon it's not just the vehicle hardware, but then it's also about the ecosystem, and then also the architectures, and eventually the coverage, broad coverage, wherein with a small cell densification or otherwise the frequencies which we are talking of, which has which has of course a very high bandwidth, but then in terms of a propagation has a certain limits. And also in terms of really talking of one specific feature or a KPI of 5G, which is clearly relevant for an automotive system, is ultra reliable low latency communication, or URLLC. And for us to really realize the benefits of URLLC, what I see is this requires, and especially for a CV industry, wherein we are not just talking of a given area or a given ecosystem, but then we're talking of a spread across the country, which itself is huge and has a different terrains as such. So for us, what I feel personally, it's my personal take, for us to really speak of applications which are relevant for CV or for automotive with low latencies, and we're really talking of a highway platooning or otherwise, platooning being the best example, where we really speak of saving of energy and increasing the comfort and so on, is going to take some time even in other markets, and same is the case with India. Whereas where we really see 5G is really going to make an impact, with hopefully with release 17, where we really see a lot of these applications going to be software intensive. When we say, I think Rahul can watch for it, being working on software space, but they're all going to be software intensive, both on the vehicle, which we call it as a edge or a device edge, and also MEC or a multi-access edge computing at the base station, and subsequently talking of the eventual OEM clouds, or the data centers far away from us. So this will hopefully will slowly roll out. But what we see as a key differentiator is, rather key aspect which we need to look at it from a technology perspective, is one is on the ecosystem side of it, to see how the ecosystem evolves, and second is how the vehicle as such evolves whenever we speak of a 5G, because we are really talking of a new RF design, a new approach for software, and new architectures and so on. So we need to ensure that as the ecosystem is evolving, as we also need to ensure the vehicle is really prepared to work in this ecosystem. And of course, if we really ask this question to say someone like Mr. Ajay Sharma, he also watches upon total cost of ownership, and keeping that as our the premises with which we need to address. So I feel the technology drivers on the vehicle, technology drivers on the ecosystem, and then total cost of ownership will eventually drive 5G in India or in any other market. And 5G, as with auction eventually happening in the next financial year, hopefully, and with especially our Indian MNOs, or the mobile network operators really picking up some spectrum and slowly rolling out, I see 5G as a mainstream, perhaps relevant in next 3 to 4 years for an Indian market.
Right. Thank you, Mr. Datta. And I think you touched upon some key points, for which I will go across to Mr. Sharma and Mr. Jagannathan also in just a bit to take their perspective also. But before that, just going over to you, Mr. Govindrao. So, Mr. Jain also touched upon how with 5G you can see traffic conditions, so on, ahead of the vehicle, behind the vehicle, which also helps in reducing accidents. Or like Mr. Datta mentioned about platooning, which could also be a major driver towards reducing accidents by reducing driver fatigue, etc. Do you think there are any, and one more aspect that I want to touch upon with you is also about something that Mr. Jagannathan has also touched upon, the AI aspect, with this data. So since I'm coming to you after going across to Betty, so I'm pouring all those questions to you at once. So what are some of your experiences, especially from the North American market, of these things being deployed? And are there any lessons that were learned there, which we can also sort of, cross-deploy in India?
Sure. Thanks, Ashim. So Actually, regarding how we see 5G being potentially useful to like what we do, which is, trying to understand how the driver is doing, how the driver is handling this expensive piece of equipment that he's handling, or he or she is handling. Where we see the biggest use case is to be able to run more sophisticated AI models. We are a company that specializes really on AI on the edge. And to earlier point, I think Santosh made about how you need to adapt everything to the Indian context, and how everything is not just about the value you provide, but also the cost of that value you provide, right? It's always a cost value trade-off in the Indian market. And in fact, it's actually true in the global market, right? When we started, we thought it's only true in the Indian market, but not at all. Even in the US market, you give somebody an equivalent service, or even like 80% of the service at 50% of the cost, almost always they'll go for the other one. I mean, we have this perception, at least I had this perception that the US market was not value conscious, but it is very value conscious, provided you give them value, right? At a comparable value at a reasonable price. So 5G, see today, running AI on the edge is very, very hard, especially when you talk about video, vision, things become very, very hard. And that is our expertise. And we are able to do that. We are able to provide things like DMS on cameras, which cost a little over $100, which is still very attractive even for the Indian market. And in the US market, it's actually kind of causing a mini revolution, because most cameras cost a lot more. But the thing is, what you can do with such a competitively priced hardware is, to be honest, limited, right? We always think of more things we can do. And so where 5G can help is to be able to offload some of that compute away from the camera and to the base station. And when you talk about doing more sophisticated things on the edge, to be able to do, let us say, for example, something like like a truck transporting hazardous material, and for them to have intelligence around the vehicle. You have a surround view of cameras, and you want to process video from so many cameras to see if there are, like vulnerable road users who may potentially cause accidents for this dangerous cargo carrying vehicle. In all those cases, I think the only option will be 5G and the computing in the base station, because if you can have all the computing on the edge, to be honest, right? But it's just going to push the price up so much that it may not be very attractive to have that as a sort of, that kind of a variant in your product, because it's applicable to so few people. The advantage with having computing on the base station will be that your hardware can be like a common denominator, but your services that you provide in terms of the AI, the capability, and all that can be scaled up and down depending on your customer and their needs, right? I think so. Sort of that is the most important thing from a 5G point of view. Now, the other thing I really liked about what sort of Mr. Lakshmi Narasimhan mentioned is the human aspect when it comes to drivers and driver behavior. I think that is where video really excels. And like he mentioned, video really augments all the other things you do. It's a classical case of where 1 + 1 = 3, right? In the sense that you know so much about what the vehicle is telling you, what you think the driver is interacting with the vehicle, and all of that. Video just adds this super important information of how, why, and like what was the driver doing, right? Like let us say the engine you recorded a very high RPM on your engine, and you want to know now what happened. Video will just tell you why that happened, right? What was the drive? What did the driver see in front of him or her that he had to do that? Or was it just like a bad driving practice, in which case he or she needs to be coached about it, that you don't do that. It's not good for the engine, right? The biggest thing for us, like there's a lot of statistics which talk about how 94% of accidents are caused by human error and not so much the vehicle error, because all the esteemed people on this panel have done a mighty fine job. The vehicles are like manufactured with very, very, very high reliability. It's unfortunately us who use cell phones get distracted and not use the equipment properly, right? Which is where I think when you bring in the human element and make sure that the human is interacting with the vehicle in a way to exploit the full potential of the vehicle, that people like Ajay or Mr. Lakshmi Narasimhan have designed, that is where video I think really comes into its own, right? So
sure. Right, thank you. Yeah, I think you touched upon some very important aspects over there, and especially the one that you talked about offloading compute from the vehicle to the base, and then using that computing power to compute, and thereby making driving safer. On that, I would go over to Mr. Chakki once again. So you mentioned right at the start of this panel that there is direction needed from the regulator to bring about UBI. At the same time, we are also seeing the significant investments required. One is for setting up all of this stuff, developing the technology, localizing it for India, and then finally, even for the end consumer to buy it, put it in the vehicle, and all of that, right? So, do you feel somewhere there is a need for some sort of a body or panel to be set up, which is like a cross-functional between OEMs, technology providers, logistic service providers, to as well as insurance companies like yours, to show that by doing so, this is going to be a win-win situation for everyone. We are losing significant part of our GDP, for example, on account of the accidents that happen, and also precious lives are lost on account of that. So, do you think something like like this could be done, and maybe it's the insurance companies that could spearhead an initiative like this to bring about more awareness and thereby also bring about a regulation around UBI?
Yeah, I'll just first, let me accept one fact that there has been a considerable amount of development in the last couple of years, both on the telematics side as well from the OEM side in this aspect. And there almost all OEMs, almost all the panelists have also said that almost all OEMs are now heavily into telematics. It started off with, first with the equipment, then it came down to apps. Now even imported technologies are getting used to, and driving pattern, everything, etc., are been followed now. So in terms of data, I think the industry has some data already, which has been collected by the OEMs, thankfully, by almost using these technologies on their own, and they have taken a hit. The vehicle prices had not been affected to that extent, but the technology is being used. Which I am aware of, at least the major manufacturers, all the major manufacturers have been building this for last at least 1.5 years now, almost, in certain category of vehicles, which is their high sales vehicles. So in that time, the data is available. Now, the point that you have mentioned is also correct, that there has to be multiple regulators, maybe from the Ministry of Transport, maybe insurance, IRDA, and other bodies. Even I would support it for the banks to come up with a constructive model as to how this can be shaped up and used in future, so that the country benefits from its usage. One point which was touched by a panelist was, of course, on the safety. Not only on the safety, it's also on the efficiency. If you see, there are certain large fleet operators who have been, quite, I would say, quite, they're able to manage these fleets extremely well currently, and they don't allow the drivers to drive for more than 8 hours in a day. The driver is able to come back to the city where he stays normally, so there's no longer long overhauls, etc., and considerable amount of claims have gone down for some particular large fleet operators. So on one side, what is happening is there is a customer awareness which has been happening now. The second is technology is picking up very fast, and OEMs are welcoming it, welcoming the technology, and that is giving rise to data getting there with them. But the only part is all these three things have to be put together to show some value proposition to the customer and ultimately the end user. Of course, for insurance side, it will remain the same. I am even hopeful that maybe banks would come up with loan offers on fleet operators who have been extremely conscious and with having low frequency of claims. Maybe time would come that they would be rated better, given a better offer by the banks or the NBFCs who are funding them. Insurance will, of course, slowly, once after this discount thing is over, because now the fight is completely on the discount alone by all insurance companies. But owing to the losses, sooner or later the industry will, graduate and ultimately take stock of the entire situation. And once that happens, even insurance premium will also be rated accordingly. So I'm very sure that the future is very bright. With the new 5G technologies coming up, things will be real time. The cost will go down. People will be finding it useful. And of course, there will be better trained, better equipped people who will be driving those vehicles. And overall, the safety aspect, the cost aspect, the replacement or the repair portions, etc., will come down, and it would look for much better than what it is today. That's what I am hoping for the CV segment in India.
Sure.
But of course, with the cooperation of the regulators, yes.
Yes, and so, in other words, saying when all of this starts falling in place, people see more adoption. Maybe the regulator also realizes this and yields in favor of this, because we also know it's wafer thin margins in this industry. So if he's getting a shaving off on the insurance the insurance rates, naturally the operators will be incentivized to adopt these to a larger extent as well. Sure. With that, another set of questions. I'll go to you first, Mr. Jagannathan, and then Mr. Sharma. I'll want your views also on that. As far as and we heard about that in the course of the discussion also from Mr. Datta, Mr. Govindrao, and Mr. Jain. So, you think some of these global trends that are there, they would need very specific adoptions, and adaptations to be able to fit the Indian context? Or be a success in the Indian market? And if yes, what are some of those critical things that would need to be changed? Will that also have, say, a policy angle to it? For example, AIS 140 in part, also hinting towards the same. And further on, then how can these telematics solutions be leveraged to increase the fleet longevity and the profitability in the Indian context? So over to you, Mr. Jagannathan, to start with, and then Mr. Sharma, would like your comments on that as well.
Okay. So to start with, on a global scenario, people say what is really changing the commercial vehicle or automotive industry, we call it as CASE, connected automotive, connected autonomous, shared and electric. But for India, we feel it will be like connected autonomous, then there will be a sustainable energy, then electric will be like a e-bus. So because you cannot directly adapt what is there in a global economy here. So we will be going for sustainable energy where hydrogen or LPG, CNG, a lot of things will be there because India is a diversified country and you cannot directly move 100% to electric. And even in electric, on a cost conscious, it has to be on an EMAS operation where mobility as a service. People may not be having that much funds to buy an electric vehicle, or going forward, it will be on a mobility as a service basis. And one thing we need to remember, India is cost conscious. So we are working on low cost, maximum value product. That is where we will be in a position to sell, because India is for the mass. So you need to sell for the mass. Today, the one biggest problem in commercial vehicle industry is tech savviness. So though there are millennials who are going to take over the business, but it will take some time for it to become a tech savvy economy as a whole. And customization, N=1. Every customer, the way he do business in India is quite different. So the way they want to record the books, or they want to do business, how they want to hire the drivers, everything varies. So there is a bit of customization here available. And the one of the biggest challenge we have is a customer is having multi-OEM vehicle and they are looking for a unified report. So there will be a vehicle from Ashok Leyland or Tata Motors or from Mahindra. Everyone will be having their telematics device, but customer expects everything on the same dashboard. And so though we have some constraints, what I feel is that we should be doing upon so that we will be catching up to this is, first thing is data standardization, which even I'm working as a part of a few of the forums where we are looking upon data standardization, where every device will send up the data in a standard format. And the next thing is data as a service. We call it as an API economy, where this data can be shared and it can be used upon. And today, what customer expects from the telematics is, they expect telematics to do the complete heavy weighting. Heavy lifting of everything has to be done by the telematics. And what customer needs is an actionable insights or reports. So a lot of things they expect us to do, or a telematics vendor to do, and what they need is just an action to be provided. So we have to be, whereas in the global economy, where the customer is tuned to look into the data and do all the aspects, whereas in India, they expect a sharp pointers to act upon. And the last one, which we are also working on, we call it as an open data ecosystem, which we are also working with the CII to form something called a node, which called automobile open data ecosystem. So where we are looking at every OEM, every vendor, even the charge providers or the petrol bunk providers or any hotels, they will be sharing this data into the system. And we will be, as the OEM, we will also be sharing the data into the system, where we will be looking upon cross-pollination of all the outcomes or the new apps are getting developed. But here there are difficulties, but government is also helping us and trying to see how this establishment can be done. And on the ecosystem, today we are seeing a blurring of the ecosystem, where even Datta can also vouch upon this. Today, no more it's like OEM developing the product. OEM and also the tier one vendor are tying up, and it becomes part of the common or single ecosystem. Today, we co-develop. There is nothing called develop and deliver. Today, it is called co-develop. And you can see the recent launches of MG Hector, where it is not partnered with one vendor. We will be partnering with multiple vendors, and multiple vendors work together on a single product. So there is nothing like one vendor, one product. There will be multiple vendors working upon to deliver a connected product. Today, it's no more a product. We call it as a connected product. So this, with these aspects, how the fleet longevity and profitability is going to increase. That was one of the questions, where we have something like today, it's like today vehicle is, today's vehicle or tomorrow's vehicle will be like a mobile phone. Okay, so if you want to update, there is no need for the vehicle to come to the dealer point or a service engineer to visit. So it will be completely on the remote. So there will be a remote diagnostics when a vehicle halts on a vehicle. When a vehicle halts on the road, there is no need for an engineer to visit. We will take the vehicle on remote, we will service you. Or any software has to be upgraded. You want new performance on the vehicle. You want to improve the power on the vehicle. What not can be done? Everything can be done over the air upgrades, like the simple mobile phones, like Android mobile phones. And with the video telematics, which we are talking about, so something like we are working on, like how to avoid accidents. Can we give a warning, something before the accident happens, or when the accident happens, to get the faster insurance? What can be done to really understand whether the problem is with the driver or with the vehicle that is coming in the front? Not only that, low-cost ADAS, which is going to improve the longevity of the vehicle. So here a lot of vendors are working on, because we cannot adapt what all the ADAS existing, what is there in the European market in here. So we need to have a low-cost ADAS virtual assistance, which is going to be the future. No more touch, we call it as touchless. So you talk, it responds. And wearables. Today, we are also looking at how we can have a wearables for the driver. So I can attach that wearables to the system, where I will know how much the vehicle, how much he's driving. Is he tired? How is his heart? How is it? Can we integrate this to his family? So everyone will be connected. So this is also, we are also working on. So we call it as a driver community building. So because driver is the one, today we say he is abused a lot. So we want to try to improve his life. So we are also working upon how we can have a community building across the driver, which will improve the profitability for the fleet or for a customer.
Okay, sure. Thank you. I think, yeah, you elaborated on some very pertinent points, whether it's mass as a mass market or it's mobility as a service, that mass, and you know how different vehicles are there in the fleet. So the standardization of data as a service, action needed. The customers just need the actionable data. They don't really have the capabilities to do any analysis, and at the same time, you know, also about over-the-air updates. And yeah, definitely you could probably just change the characteristics from power to efficiency and things like that. And also how ADAS, which is the future, will play a key role. And I think finally and very importantly on community building within the drivers, because as a profession, I think that also it needs a lot of upgradation, especially in a mindset upgradation for people to adopt for this profession as well. Right. Thank you, Mr. Jagannathan, for that. Mr. Sharma, over to you for your perspective on the same question. Mr. Sharma, can you hear us? Yeah, can you hear me? Okay, I think we'll wait. Sorry, Rohit.
Yeah, I think his connection is patchy. because I
think his connection is patchy. So we'll come back to him in a minute. While we do that, so in the interim, let me just go across to Mr. Jain, and then I'll request Mr. Datta for your perspective also on this. And we heard about, how, partnering is becoming very important. So one is, of course, the partnering between the suppliers and the OEMs, but we also see, the role of service partners such as telecom operators, V2X system providers. Will it be limited only to technology development, or will they be perceived as technology partners for the entire systems, going up to what US suppliers develop and finally leading up to how the OEMs also deploy it?
Extremely valid question, and there are two different aspects to it. If we look at growth in each individual industry, all these different players are also trying to come into the other ecosystems. So today, operators are interested in trying to find out how they can play a role in automotive market. If I take about cloud providers like Amazon or Microsoft, they are also trying to figure out how they can play a role in an automotive market, for example. Now, one of the things that we are working on and is, for example, there was talk about the edge compute or compute on the cloud perspective. We consider edge as basically a near to the road or next to the road infrastructure where the compute can happen, because there will be always a limit of the compute in the car. And there will be a need for offloading this compute near, so that with the low latency that compute can happen, and then the decision or the outcome can be distributed across different vehicles that are on the road, with whether it is with V2X or with 5G in play and so on. And in this ecosystem, all these players are keenly trying to collaborate. So we are working with operators to see how they can enable 5G and provide us a low latency to specific edge devices. We are working with the cloud providers who are ready to deploy infrastructure on the edge, like in the city or near to the road or a junction, where the compute can happen in where applications can be deployed to perform a high compute and a quick response can be given. So there is going to be a very big trend we'll see, or there's going to be a big impact, because these technology providers have matured solution and they also want to contribute and be part of this ecosystem. So that's definitely going to happen. In India, it'll take time. But I would say it'll be much faster, because India is late but a much faster adopter of technology, and with big operators like Airtel and Jio and others who are already trying to do experiments with 5G and so on. I believe that these things will come in already. We are doing certain trials in Western markets where we are working with these providers to enable such solutions and so on. So I believe, yes, these players will also come into this ecosystem.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Jain. So, as we heard one of the panelists say, 1 + 1 actually equal to 3 when, such people join forces. Certainly it could happen. Mr. Datta, your perspective of the same.
Can you please repeat?
Yeah, we can hear you. We can hear you.
Like I just lost your voice in between, so I lost your voice in between.
Okay, sure, Mr. Datta, I can repeat the question. So I was saying, what role do you see service partners such as telecom operators, V2X system providers play in here? Will they be limited only to technology development, or will they be perceived as technology partners working with you all to, perfect the solutions, and then alongside also with the OEMs? Because we know OEMs and suppliers have this very strong co-working, but now in the connected world, you have these new stakeholders coming in. So how do you see that going forward?
Yep. I think Ashim, I got the question. Sorry, in between there was a lag. I just echo the thoughts of Mr. Lakshmi Narasimhan, primarily because there is a democratization which is happening on technology, and there will be layers which will be abstracted, and wherein there will be, it's no more a competition, but then it's a competition. That means, we sometimes we need to work with the competitors, sometimes we have to work with the technology partners. And the way I look at it is, I mean, the technology provider or a partner for me is just one and the same. And eventually there's something called as an orchestration which needs to happen in the entire ecosystem. And what the way we look at it, or the way I look at it personally, is also that the orchestration eventually will be done either by an OEM or otherwise a consortium or otherwise a technology provider. And eventually this orchestration, that means the complete ecosystem or a cloud which we are talking of, will be augmented by the content providers or insurance service providers or auxiliaries provider. It could be tire as a service, or otherwise it could be, servicing setting up the connectivity to the dealer. So it's eventually in connectivity system, it's not just one partner play, or otherwise one supplier play or a one OEM play, but then it's going to be an ecosystem where there will be a participants from different domains, which are in the value chain, and all of them will participate. And eventually what actually defines or decides the value proposition and then the revenue generation is how do we orchestrate the solution, and how do we customize the solution for a given application, and how do we ensure that the entire all the participants in the value chain are compensated accordingly. That's how I would look at it. So for me, everyone in the ecosystem, whenever they are bringing a value, is a technology partner as well as partner in the entire value chain, and obviously.
Sure. Sure. Thank you, Mr. Datta. So I think with that, I think we've heard all the drivers that would be there, which will hopefully increase the share of connected trucks in India. It currently stands at a single digit 4 to 6%, too much higher numbers. At the same time, it'll also help improve the wafer thin margins of the LSPs. It'll probably bring down the accidents as well, reduce the insurance premiums, and then hopefully we will have an interconnected system with which the data coming out could also lead to more possibilities, including even new revenue streams for the OEMs. I think we couldn't get back Mr. Ajay Sharma because of a connectivity issue. So with that, I think we'll move on to the audience questions if there are any. Rohit, could you...
So Ashim, I'll support your efforts on this one. So I'll start with the first one. Mr. Bala Subramanian Vaidyanathan had asked, when will we have CVR or cockpit voice recorder in a commercial vehicle? To which Mr. Krishna Govindarao from Lightmetrics has replied that with video telematics and camera recording continuously, the voice audio can also be recorded and made available on demand. However, there is a huge privacy aspect involved in this, which needs to be carefully addressed. So that was the answer to that. Mr. Krishna, would you like to further elaborate on that, or we can move on to the next one if that sufficiently answers?
At least in my mind, it sufficiently answers. And in the Indian market, I'm not quite sure, but at least outside, the privacy consciousness is just so much that they don't mind the video. I mean, even video they mind. Of course, drivers don't like driver-facing video to be recorded, but they have made their peace with it. But voice seems crossing the line.
Okay, sure. Next question. I think this is this I'll direct to Mr. Lakshmi Narasimhan first, and then somebody else can take it also. So in terms of what is the expectation on TCO savings while using connected vehicle to the one without it? This is from Shri Kumar Srinivasan.
See, actually, it's one of the toughest questions, which even we are trying to, market the product or services in India. Today, as I always say, India is a cost competitive and cost conscious market. But we are also trying to see, what benefit it makes. Some of the benefits are tangible and intangible in nature. So customer always believes in the tangible benefits, which will take time for him to realize it. Okay, something like more than 60% of his spend is on the fuel. So if you give something that increases fuel economy by 0.1, is where he really recognizes that. Mm-hmm. Whereas there are a lot of other intangible benefits like the life of the vehicle getting improved because of his proper driving, his warranty cost is getting reduced. That can be realized over the time when he start using it. So that is where it's a kind of a tricky situation where you need to balance between the tangible and intangible benefit you show to the customer. And generally, customer buys it if you have at least 5 to 6% improvement in TCO if he feels he's going to get out of it. And the TCO the customer or the return on investment the customer expects is somewhere between 6 to 9 months is what today the customer is expecting.
Okay, great. Would one of you like to take that, either from Bosch, Herman, or Light Metrics? One of you guys would like to take.
Okay, I'll just extend. So, Rahul, you're speaking, or I'll just go on. Okay, I mean, one of the aspects whenever we speak of a TCO, I mean, TCO as Lakshmi Narasimhan said is a pretty big topic. But then, in case of a commercial vehicle, there are a couple of functional, of course, non-functional KPIs which we really need to look at. Is the reliability, how could we ensure that the reliability aspects are taken care of? There you cannot really attach a $1 or $2 or 1% or 2%. And availability, because if you could really enhance the availability by doing a prognosis or looking at the insights and so on. And third is also, it's not just about the TCO for the end customer, but then also about the ROI for the OEM in terms of say potential warranty analytics or software update in the field and so on. So wherein the cost of investment, there is an investment, and where we do see a returns as an OEM or someone who is in the value chain. And eventually for an end user, when we speak of a fleet operator in TCO, whatever gains which we could actually give, with a driver coaching as one specific example, which we also heard from Light Metrics, wherein we could really show a substantial improvement in fuel efficiency with all these values bringing in. We also look at how could we optimize the fuel costs, and eventually going forward, as Mr. Chaki mentioned, on how could we save on insurance. So TCO, we need to look at it from a different dimensions, as Lakshmi Narasimhan said, intangible aspects like reliability, availabilities, or and warranty analytics and so on, and return on investments for an OEM, and eventually also what benefits we could bring to an end user to save the fuel, even if it is 5% over the year. There are customers who are willing to there we see willing to invest significant amounts for telematics.
So if it's okay, Rohit, I'd just like to share my perspective on top of that. Sorry for interrupting. So, when we talk about TCO, it always looks like the burden is on the solution providers, the OEMs and the tier ones and whatnot. But I want to bring in how the fleets can help themselves the most, right? This goes back to what Lakshmi Narasimhan was saying about driver coaching, right? Safety is a culture, right? Bad habits creep up over time, right? Like the first time I jump a traffic light, nothing happens. That habit, and I save like say 70 seconds, and that kind of becomes a habit, and I think I'm too clever until I'm not, right? So this is where being able to get granular insights into driver behavior will only help if the fleet instills a coaching program, drivers are made self-aware of their driver behavior, and most importantly, we have seen success by positive reinforcement. You don't use these insights to penalize drivers. You use these insights to positively recognize good driver behavior. So I would say when it comes to safety, right, there's only so much OEMs can do, and they're already doing a lot. There's so much the fleet themselves can do as well.
Okay, great. So now we will jump to the final question. This is from Jayant Upasani. He has asked the question, what is the important aspect to be considered while going for telematics enforcement traceability for uptime or safety regulation? Would one of you like to take that? Anyone? Rahul, would you like to take that?
Yeah.
Maybe I'll just add one specific point from my side. Can you hear me?
Yeah, yes.
Yes.
Okay. There's one aspect which we really need to look at is, there's always this personal data protection bill. If you look at India as a market, PDPB, which is going to be eventually rolled out. So that's something which we really need to be addressing this, because this is it's a compliance requirement, and eventually the solutions which we are talking of, we need to ensure that this is being taken care of. This is from a compliance perspective. But then another important aspect which we really need to enforcement, because enforcement is a word based on which I'm making this response. So enforcement of traceability is always driven by end user license agreement and then the complying to a given regulation. So this is how I would look at it, especially whenever we look at managing the fleets and managing the end users or capturing the video and so on. But eventually, when it comes to a safety regulation for a public utility vehicles, again, this is a different aspect altogether, because some of it is being addressed in current AS 140 Part A regulation, and eventually will be addressed in Part B regulation. So these the word enforcement is predominantly driven by the legislation. So for a public utility vehicles, it works in a specific way, and then for a fleet operator or for an individual owner, it works in a different way. And eventually, as all of us discussed, the TCO and the tangible and intangible insights which one gets is the key aspect which we need to keep in mind, and the value which we bring.
So, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. So one aspect I just want to add here is that I mean, with technology being enabled, with so much of data being captured, it is extremely important to ensure that the privacy and misuse of this data does not happen. It opens up opportunities of hackers. It opens up opportunities for somebody to misuse and play around with the system. And of course, I think safety regulations are there are certain regulations or certain standards being maintained by the OEMs, because especially like when we develop products, there are regulatory compliance that are required. There are compliance that comes from the OEMs themselves that we must comply to. And then in Harman, we have our own standards that we must comply to, especially being developing products across different geographies and with different OEMs. So we try to create a superset and try to run through that. And it is an extremely important aspect. And as of today, it is not so much I'm not sure, but maybe our co-panelists can confirm that from an Indian market how well regulated it is, but this has to be kept in play. And this is going to be extremely important, because with with connected vehicles, many things can happen. We have had cases earlier where somebody could remotely control a vehicle, or I mean, like we see in movies that people can actually track you or do some things around it. So it's important to have these in place. And both, I mean, on one side, government has a key important role to, or regulators have an important role to define this. And I think OEMs have also an extremely important role to make sure that whatever products they are putting in the car are safety compliant, are secured, and enabled.
Okay. So with that, Ashim, would you like to do a quick sum up and a buy? Then I can just say.
Yeah, I think, as I already said, I think we've had a wealth of information come across, in terms of what could be the catalysts for, wider use of telematics in the country, whether it's, in terms of sort of localizing the solutions as per the Indian context, making them more pocket friendly, at the same time also from a regulatory standpoint, what needs to be touched upon. I think we've seen all those aspects come in, also from a collaboration standpoint, whether it's OEM suppliers or it's also the other stakeholders in the overall ecosystem. So I did thoroughly enjoy myself moderating it. I hope the audience also got a wealth of information out of it. So thank you everyone for that very interesting discussion.
Thank you. Thank you.